The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. Good to be back in the studio. It's been a while. Fortunately, nothing broke while I was gone. That's always a good thing.
We did change the interior design layout of the studio, but we got it back to normal by the time you returned. So you wouldn't notice, which is a good thing.
Other than that, which you forgot. No, I'm kidding. Okay, one story that I have been following during the last week and a half or so is that of Botham Jean, who was killed by Dallas police officer Amber Geiger, who entered his apartment using the excuse that she believed it was her apartment. And she is getting a lot of special privileges as a police officer who is accused of having committed crimes, and it's starting to raise a lot of questions. Like, for example, when she was, first of all, she was likely only arrested because of the public outcry and media coverage of the story. When she was arrested, she was charged with manslaughter as opposed to something more serious, spent a mere few hours in custody, which is unusual for someone suspected of having killed somebody else. And then police obtained a warrant on the victim's apartment rather than hers, presumably trying to find something there that might exculpate her. They found a little bit of pot, and that became the big story around Botham Jean. Cut to now, and we've learned that her apartment still hasn't been searched. How do you not search the apartment of the suspected killer, but you've already gone through and found pot at the victim's place? And people are understandably very upset here.
Yeah, I totally get that. And certainly we don't know the full story yet. We don't know exactly what happened. She claims, as you mentioned, that she thought she was entering her own apartment and saw the silhouette of a man who she thought was a burglar.
Yes.
And so shot him without asking questions first, which is a problem. But I guess that's an understandable scenario. There are also witness accounts that she yelled, "Let me in, let me in," and that Botham Jean had said, "Why did you do that?" presumably asking, "Why did you shoot me?" So we don't know the full story yet, but certainly she should have been treated as someone who did kill someone, maybe not intentionally. We don't know if it's murder or manslaughter or what happened here, but just having her in prison or jail for a few hours and letting her go, that's not acceptable.
Do we know, I also read about this let me in thing. Would someone yell let me in, if they thought it was their own apartment? Like that seems to be fundamentally confusing to me.
Conceivably, if a burglar is in there and tries to lock you out, I guess that could happen. But wouldn't it make you second guess whether or not you were at your own apartment?
Or whether or not you should go in. Like if you think someone has broken in and is burglarizing, I guess, if you're a police officer, maybe you behave differently, but even police officers tend to call for backup. Do you start saying, let me in, if you believe that there's a danger to you inside the apartment?
It would make me second guess everything because apparently the apartment layout is very similar across floors.
Sure.
So maybe she lives on floor 3, but he was on floor 2. I think once I realized someone was in what I thought was my own apartment, I would double check the number on the door and make sure. And apparently she didn't do that.
When I lived in Brooklyn, I lived on the 11th floor of a building, and every floor had the exact same layout. And at one time it happened that I got onto the elevator and I hit 11 and I wasn't paying attention. I must have been looking at my mail that I had just grabbed or something like that. And the door dinged and it opened and I got out and I made a right out of the elevator and a left into that hallway and went all the way down to the end and to the last door on the right, and I put my key in and the key wouldn't turn. And very quickly I realized I'm on the 8th floor, not the 11th floor. Somebody had pressed 8, and then I was embarrassed. Nobody saw it. I walked away and I went back in. Whether or not I realized that it was the wrong apartment, as soon as I identify that there's someone inside, I stop trying to get in, right? Like if I still believe, if I hear that there's someone inside, first I would see if it's my apartment.
For your own safety even.
If it was my apartment and there was someone inside, I still wouldn't try to go in if I didn't think that it was someone I lived with, for example. So like just no elements of the story make any sense.
Yeah, so that sounds like a somewhat embarrassing situation for you, but you managed not to shoot anyone in the process.
Well, I didn't have a gun.
That's good, at least.
There was also nobody to shoot, fortunately. Nobody was around. We talked recently about foreign aid. And the United States, according to an annual index released a couple days ago from the Center for Global Development, ranks 27th among the world's wealthiest countries in terms of foreign aid. scoring dead last on foreign aid contributions and quality, despite being the largest donor in dollar amount. And this is because as a percentage of gross national income, only 0.18% of American GNI has been designated for development assistance. And that is well short of the 0.7 which wealthy countries strive for. So we're not quite 0.2, and the target that wealthy countries strive for is 0.7. So a few different thoughts. Number one, we've talked about the quality of foreign aid, and I'm more interested in the quality than the quantity, although the quantity is still something relevant to discuss. The quality of American aid is considered relatively poor for its inefficient use, lack of transparency, and I talked about this recently, it doesn't build up institutions in recipient countries. I talked about, when you talk about foreign aid, there is giving money to a country so that they can build up their own infrastructure and institutions so that maybe in the future they will be more self-sustaining. And then there is giving money that doesn't really solve a problem. An example of this is if you give a country shoes because the people don't have shoes, you're not really strengthening the economy. You're just giving people shoes and you're actually eliminating demand for shoes locally. Yes, people with shoes maybe can work more or better or more efficiently, but big picture, you're not really solving a problem. So the US not ranking well on either. Surprising? I don't know. I mean, Republicans will say, we have such a big country that 0.18% of our money is still way more than 0.7% of what some of these really small countries are able to give. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good argument. Doesn't sound like a good one.
It's funny to see Americans polled on this topic, like how much of the federal budget do you think we spend on foreign aid? And people will guess like 10%, 20%, and maybe they're getting that confused with military spending, which does, add up to about that.
Big confusion.
But no, it's just like it's fractions of 1%. It's 0.2%. And I think there's certainly an argument to be made that we should be given more, but that would have to come with budget cuts, right? And I think that would most likely come from military spending. If we spent less on wars and spent more on foreign aid, I think that would be better for the entire world, right?
It most likely should come from that. To say it most likely would, that's like the sacred cow. Military spending and defense spending. So to say it most likely would, I don't really know about that.
Should. Let's go with should.
Should, I think, is
or
something
could.
I can get behind. Could is another one, yeah. FanDuel is an online betting website. And something very interesting happened, which is that it's now football season again. And over the weekend, the Denver Broncos were playing the Oakland Raiders. And very late in the fourth quarter, the Broncos were clearly going in the direction of a win. They were trailing the Raiders 19-17, but they were close enough that they would be able to kick a relatively comfortable field goal. And what happened is that for an 18-second period, Denver was a 750-1 underdog to win the game on FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is one of these gambling websites that is now more accessible to people who want to bet on sports because sports gambling was legalized in New Jersey over the summer. And a lot of people, including New Jersey residents, said, wait a second, Denver's down 2, but we've got this great field goal coming up, and it's 750-1, meaning for every dollar I bet, I could get 750 back if I bet on Denver and Denver ends up winning. That seems like a really great deal.
Yeah, even though Denver should probably be the favorite in that scenario. If not the favorite, then it should be 50-50. Like that, those odds do not make sense.
The odds didn't make sense, but it was what showed up for about an 18-second period. And one man, for example, placed a $110 bet and got a ticket which said he would win $82,500 from the counter of the Meadowlands racetrack in Newark. That is allegedly a mistake, according to FanDuel, and the Broncos did win, and people expected to get their 750-1 payouts, and they're not getting them, at least for now.
Yeah.
This has happened at casinos before, right? Where you get this massive payout, ding, 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 I just won $2 million, and the casino says, you won that in error. The machine's algorithm was malfunctioning and we're not going to pay you the money. Here's a $500 voucher to use at any one of our restaurants type of thing. I have no sympathy for these companies. I understand the idea that if it really is a malfunction, then maybe the company shouldn't be held accountable, but like the machine maker or whoever controls the software, like for whatever reason, someone bet in good faith money on the basis of 750 to 1 odds. The fact that it was a quote mistake is not the bettor's fault. So I still feel like someone needs to make them good. Maybe it's not totally clear who that should be.
Yeah, they're not going to give him that huge payout, but I guess they offered him 3 tickets, box seat tickets to NFL games, which is something, but he declined it. I think the problem is, like, if you flip this situation around, so let's say the bettor, he wanted to place a bet of $10, but accidentally filled it in wrong, and he placed $1,000. Then the game's over, he lost his money, he calls up FanDuel and said, hey, I only meant to bet $10, I accidentally bet $1,000, can you make this right for me? They're not going to do that for him. That's not going to happen. And I understand that, you know, this isn't something you can really scale. Like if 10 people or 100 people all won $100,000 because they took advantage of these bogus odds, and they all won that amount of money, there's no way that a company could afford that. But apparently very few people took advantage of this and noticed it was going on. I think you should honor the payout.
You do think so?
I think so. But like if you're talking about billions, obviously they can't do that. So you have to draw a line somewhere too.
One of the arguments they're making is that the error was so obvious that no reasonable person could think that it made sense. And when you look at the numbers, they were lining up for like, I think it was a 36-yard field goal. And people went and looked at like, what are the odds of making a 36-yard field goal in these circumstances? And it's like between 85 and 90%. So if you have, with seconds to go in the fourth quarter, a scoring opportunity that historically works 85 to 90% of the time, and that would put you ahead, should you win 750x your bet in that scenario? No, you know what? It's pretty damn obvious that you shouldn't, that it doesn't make sense. But still, it's just very difficult for me to accept that FanDuel bears no responsibility here for paying out what they offered.
I mean, what's the solution? What's the middle ground? I think no one else was so significantly affected as this man was. But I think just offering him a few NFL tickets isn't going to cut it. You got to meet him halfway, maybe.
Maybe, and I don't really. I'm saying this sort of like to float it. I don't really think this is a great idea, but maybe these companies like FanDuel need to be insured for exactly this type of situation, where they pay some kind of insurance policy that covers up to, you know, they might say we have $100 million of coverage for payouts requested, payouts owed to people as a result of odds errors or something like that. I don't know. Is that a solution? And then you put the risk. The idea
put the
of
risk onto someone else.
The idea of just more insurance infrastructure doesn't actually seem like a solution for me, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I don't know. Send me your thoughts. What do you think should happen here? What responsibility does FanDuel have? What do you do? Welcome to all of our new members, everybody that signed up during the last month that I was out of the studio. It's good to be back, and welcome, and I'm glad to have you with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.